Hi there. Thank you for downloading, listening to, and watching the Lean Into Artcast, the show where a couple of visual storytellers get together and take on various topics that tend to occur to one when they go on this endeavor of communicating with images. We think hard about this stuff, so you will too. My name is Jerzy Drozd. I am a cartoonist and teaching artist, and the other host is...
Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Stenzinger. I'm a user experience designer, and I also teach and coach related to the design and interactive storytelling type stuff.
Ooh, another iteration. I really feel like I need to go back like 10 episodes and start collecting these. I'm sure you already have been doing that, haven't you?
Well, kind of, but like, no, that would be fun data, actually. I'm going to make that a project. Like how, like, what is the plot of, like, what are the dimensions of this aspect I emphasize or another, and like what zone is that? Maybe I'll actually figure out what to say, and it would hone in on the consistent name.
That modeling that you just saw everybody or listened to is exactly like the approach that we do. Where like it's part intuition, but then we don't just lean on that intuition. We step back and we go, okay, let's look for patterns and see what other kind of information we can glean from this, so that we can make as informed a decision as we can when we're making our choices through our communicating with images, creative work. And this week, every week we show up, we take on a topic, we try to like pick one and just like look at it as hard as we can. And we usually do it in like two sections, where one section's like what it looks like when we're doing the thing, and the second section's how we think about it. And then we got a new third section where we talk about this thing called an ongoing 2-minute practice, or checking into practice for practice's sake. And that got me thinking about an approach for this week's episode with sort of a 180 on the whole idea of checking in on a regular basis to do a practice, but like let's talk about a more goal-oriented topic, because we like both, right?
Oh, very much so. Like this so 2-minute practices has been an interesting thing to explore with creative challenges. Creative challenges has permeated and is like one of the most consistent themes in our entire body of work with Leaning to Art, because they're incredibly useful ways to sort of tackle a problem and or put some kind of thing you've been inspired to make into a circumstance and then navigate it. And whether that the result is you want to learn more and practice and build your skills, or in Jerzy's case, it's almost always to build a product. And then over the years, I couldn't help but notice that Jerzy consistently builds products with this kind of thing, and so we've talked about that, and I think it's a great. I admire that because I look back and I have I have certain work that I think, well, if in that creative challenge I would have made this more of a product, I think I could have gotten there or close, and then finished it after or what have you. Anyway, so it's a common topic for us to think through, and I think it's constructive, because what are we doing here? We're hopefully building things that we believe in, and you got to start from some idea, and it goes into a more clarified thing as you put it into the world, and then you get it out there, you share it. Hopefully, if it's more of a product, then what you're sharing is maybe something you can engage in trade with. Buy your zine, buy the comic, what have you.
Mm-hmm. Or at the very least, there'll be a clarified sort of representation of what your value is, what your values are, I should say. So, but we'll get to that. But that's the framework for this, and I think that's as good a time as any to like hit the music to say where we're gonna go next. Oh. Music is really slow. I forgot that this track starts so slow.
Oh. Nice. Wow. Power Slave.
Yeah. I got some new tracks that I just didn't test them first. I'm like, let's drop them in.
Yeah.
I like that song.
Yeah. If moody, evocative, metal with various movements in it, they'll go super slow on you. So you gotta watch out.
Well, at least it didn't start with a music box. Okay. So, so I messaged you a couple weeks ago because I was just like letting YouTube play in the background while I was working, and I came across an older video from Jake Parker, which was entitled "You Need a Product, Not a Project," episode 41 of Jake Parker's YouTube series of videos, where he like does like sort of like a talk / essay while you watch him draw. And what was this from? April 2016. And it got me thinking, because like this is what we were talking about just a moment ago, this idea that we had been really investigating and celebrating this whole idea of practicing. I'm like, well, here's like another approach where it's like, well, and also like navigating this whole idea of like, what's the difference between a product and a project, and thinking about what we just said a moment ago about like product development is like a part of this whole business. And I thought, well, maybe we can take Jake's video and leap off from it, because like how would you describe like the content of the video without spoiling too much of it, because people should go watch it if they're interested, but what's the gist?
Well, I think it's a lot of encouragement, and it's framed with some of the I think ways where you can explore this concept of well, what is a project, and what is a product, and so why not take this product approach, because it opens up these other opportunities. And Jake describes the kind of opportunities that he sees, how a product really can help an artist practice and build up your repertoire and your send signal to your audience and all that. And then he gives you useful examples of hey, make a product based on these constraints, and he has a few different recipes which I think are pretty great.
Mm-hmm.
So and then along the way, it's just, well, I mean, he's I don't know, a thoughtful artist who shares an essay as he's drawing, and it's a great thing where you don't have to watch the video, because I think his essays are decoupled from the visuals.
Right. Very much so. Yeah, and that's why I had him in one of my playlists, just so that those things can run in the background. I don't need to attend to it the way I do some other videos, right? So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you want to? What's your recommendation for how we approach this? I mean, because like, I guess like to summarize the big idea there is he really emphasized this idea of making something that has some kind of tangible finish line to it, whether not like necessarily atomic, like physical objects, but it could be a digital thing. But there's something that signifies now it is done. You have a sense of like, at this point it will be done, and I can celebrate that, and I can keep myself motivated by having this doneness to head toward, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
so then, yeah, it has just a ton of a lot of benefits. Like it focuses you. It's useful constraints. A lot of like what we've talked about with creative challenges, but then it's in a way he's talking about opening up, instead of having something that's necessarily a tight timeline entirely, but actually it could be integrated with that. So if you have like the bulk of the work you could generate during Inktober, for instance, right? But then you may have some follow-up work to package that up and turn it into a final product. And but he's encouraging, so taking that longer view of getting that thing into the world, and getting a lot of benefit from it, which I've witnessed. I mean, sure, I've made plenty of products as well, but in the context of creative challenges and whatnot, I often opt for, it's more like a project where I've allocated some time, and I'm going to keep working at it, and I see this as a commitment I'm going to stick with. But it's not as much about that handoff and getting it into the world, right? And
mm-hmm.
so, yeah, so I've really empathize with that contrast. And so what stood out to you about this, Jerzy, where um
Well, I mean,
so something about it arrested your attention, right?
so one thing that stood out to me is that the word product has mixed mixed results with when you say that word to an art community. You know,
Mm.
um, you see what I'm saying? Because like, there's something about the word product that like. It's also in the zeitgeist right now. It's like, well, if you know, like if you're using a free service, you're the product. You know, there's like this. There's a lot of debate right now about like whether or not capitalism is a good idea, right? Like it's in our heads and it's in a lot of discussion right now, and to declare that this is a product that I want to engage with and trade with is going to have a mixed landing depending on who you talk to. Now, I think most people
Mm.
who have engaged with our show will probably know how we react to that word. Is that, you know, it the word itself isn't necessarily have has a lot of baggage associated with it. It all depends on what you're making and how you're engaging with trade, right? It's the how that it meets the world that matters to us a lot of times, and why we make the thing that we make, right?
Hmm.
To refer to the Rob Stenzinger, what I, you know, playfully call the Rob Stenzinger coat of arms, is like you've got sort of a rubric that you can say like, well, is this product inherently bad? Well, let's test it with these, you know, statements, right?
Sure. Which is four statements. I seek to do what I love. Number one. For number two, for a community I care about. Three, using tools and methods I believe in. And then four, to engage in a sustainable trade.
Right. So
Which isn't that prescriptive, honestly. It's
it's
just
really not.
those are. It's almost like here's a pack of four broad brushes.
Right. It's
Paint the
it's not
world.
it's not a difficult test. Well, I mean, unless you got to do some serious work like on yourself, it's not a difficult test to pass. But that said, you know, it's like I thought that was an interesting thing for one. Is like he's really defining this thing as a product that is meant to go out into the world and engage with the world, right? And have some kind of reaction. Some kind trade doesn't even need to be money. Trade can be attention. Trade can be building a trail of competency that is going to lead to more opportunities for you. Trade can mean a lot of things, right? But there is, you know, sometimes there's a little bit of a pushback on this whole idea of like, well, I make art, I don't make a product. Well, okay. So I thought that was the first interesting thing, is to
Mm.
step back and say like, okay, well, let's define what Rob and Jerzy mean when we say product, because I think that we agree, like we're parallel to Jake on this, and not and I don't want to like do a one-on-one comparison of like what we think he's thinking. I just think that, again, good starting point, leap off, and like, did I define what we how we feel about product? Did I miss anything?
Yeah, no, let's see. So let's see, defining product and project. I think that uh, I I don't think you did, because I think there's a bit of well, you can interpret that, right? So I think a product infers more encapsulation than a project.
Mm-hmm.
Project is probably part of a bigger suite of, or bigger, system of endeavors where you're enabled to take on a consistent task or set of tasks or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
then it's almost like you have a job. Where's the project? Where a product is the thing that gets out there. So all right, do what it takes to get the thing out there. I also happen to see there's a whole ecosystem of ideas and different creative disciplines about putting a product into the world, because what is the reason that you're going about this? Are you
Yeah,
trying to?
let's talk about that. I want to dig at that. Like, what are, because like I don't think it's as simple as, okay, well, we set up a goalpost, then we just head for it. That's all, and that'll keep you going. There's a whole bunch of stuff in the middle
It's
that's worth looking at.
it's a useful thing. It's basically trying to take your practice and to make something tangible out of it, and it's got a lot of benefits to it by doing that. Like, I think that's pretty fantastic,
Mm-hmm.
and completely agree with Jake Parker's what he shared.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, because of different roles and whatnot, I've happened to practice in different kinds of teams, and like doing like applied research and working in um like basically I've been I've applied the creative process in a bunch of different places because of um the the systemic discipline of user experience, right? And so and applying user experience when you're in like a lab style team where you have hypotheses coming in from business collaborators, and you're evaluating them and exploring them. So I really like to empathize with so many different ways of looking at the creative process, that a few of these, and maybe we'll get into some of that later, but like some of the things that really stand out to me about, because I find my own weaknesses when I take on these other points of view, is, well, I can make a thing and it might not resonate with a group. How does that work, right? Because it's almost like you can practice the ability to put a product in the world, but then how it meets the world is another set of concerns. And so
Yeah.
where does it end? Where does the creative process finish? And I don't think it stops at the product. Basically, there's the context that you are producing the product within, and distributing it and sharing it and drawing attention to it and all that. So that's also what I think about with a product, because I think like, you think about, like, what are the odds of different kinds of outcomes when you just put a thing into the world. So if you've set yourself up to succeed by using, honestly, like all the things like Jake lists, you're I think you're setting yourself up to actually finish something, which is awesome. And then what? Um, so
Mm-hmm.
there's a few more things that I because of the word product, I think that it's like a more real thing to me personally when I think about when it's bringing value to some audience, when it's actually, you know, in the hands of others, and really I'm able to learn from that as well, right? So
Mm-hmm.
were people able to find it? And then when they started using it, did they keep using it? And did they say anything back? Did they come back for more? What have you? So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, there's
Yeah, I guess to keep digging at this, what we mean by the word product, I think another part of that definition, or at least like a flavoring of that definition, would be is that often it's something we believe in and we have a lot of personal investment in, a personal project, as it were, right? Something that comes that only we can bring into the world, and that's part of the fun of it.
Mhm.
But I also want to know that the people I'm making it for get something from it, right? Um, and so, and that feedback loop informs where to explore my work next. Like a product that I've made and that I continue to make, that I think is a good example of this, is the Captain Seriously project, which we talked about in the show a bunch of times, where every year. Oh, and by the way, I just started posting some of the art from the newest one that I just finished on my Patreon.
Oh, that's awesome.
But the whole idea is that, like, I meet with the school administration. I make these comic books just for the school district. I meet with the administrators and I talk about, like, okay, we're working on the 7th grade book. What are 7th graders going through at your school? What are some of the things that you wish you had some resources or some something to bolster a problem, or the solution to a problem you're trying to solve with these students? What's something they're experiencing? What's something they're going through? What are they doing? You know, what kind of the activities are happening in school they're engaged with? And I collect all this information from them, you know? And then that all informs the story that I create for the kids. And then I go to the school and deliver the books to the kids and talk with the kids about the adventures, right? And then it's followed up with a series of workshops where the kids make stories of their own, and I see how they're engaging with this whole idea of this world, these characters, this whole premise of making comics to help people, you know? So it's very personal. I have a lot of creative control, like more than I've ever had on any kind of freelance gig, and I have an immense amount of trust from the hosting organization and the funders in this thing. But and so I got a tremendous amount of personal satisfaction out of doing it. But part of that satisfaction is the feedback loop of the before, during, and after of the thing. It's not just holding the thing in my hand that makes it worthwhile. It's the whole experience of how the world reacts to it that helps create that feeling of creative satisfaction.
And that's another thing too, is that, like, products often they don't stand alone as far as the service of that's wrapped around a product, or
Mm-hmm.
the progression of generations of new product that happens from it as well.
Mm.
And also, it's important to not get bogged down on this. This is where I think, again, Jake's approach to this is fantastic, because it's like, where do you have the most creative control? And it's going to be, it's in this, a lot of the stuff that Jake lists.
Mm-hmm.
Building something that you believe, and sort of managing it like a, with some constraints, and embracing them, and, tuning in and being wise about it, all that. Fantastic. It's just that also, like, once you feel comfortable with, like, oh, I can make the promise to myself that I can put a product into the world. Now what? And then
Yeah.
this is also kind of the now what, where there's almost like the service aspect of it, like what you were describing, and the generations of other product that kind of, almost, yeah, that, like, you have this giant story that's like it's kind of like a suite of products in a way that you've been able to produce, which is interesting. And so products have lots of different life beyond that individual encapsulation of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I and I think that the individual encapsulation of the thing can be involving the audience more or less, depending on what kind of project. Is it more of an expression or a service? Because you were describing involving your audience, and so you're really doing design and problem defining and problem solving to help inform what that product needs to be. So
Mm-hmm.
other angles on it too is to change the nature of what that encapsulated thing is.
Mm-hmm.
How much is the audience involved or not? And so I think about, like, Guitar Fretter is an example of a product that was a bit service and expression both. But, like, I wasn't able to discover a lot about it initially because of how I invested in it. I created a prototype, and I tested it with a small audience, and then eventually created the final version. That whole story we've told a couple times, more than a couple times. But, like, when I really didn't get to discover, like, how the audience is going to react to it until I put the full thing into the world. And then I got a lot of feedback, and then I iterated on it, like, probably, I forget, 7-ish times or so. I've done updates. Some of those are really significant, and I'm currently working on a new version of Guitar Fretter. And all of this is informed by having put that initial product into the world, and then the little iterations of it, right? Where, um, books can get second editions, you can fix
Mm-hmm.
things, what have you.
Yeah.
I don't, yeah. So I don't think software stands alone in that world of adding to it. But yeah. And so let's see. So what was I?
By the way, guitarfretter.com for those who are tuning in, and it's also available for iOS and Android. Mobile game. Learn the frets on a guitar through an interactive game. So,
Right. So I had personal, stake in that, where I was like, I want to actually be better at understanding the map of the fretboard. And so I started playing around with this, and I found sort of a fun loop. And then like I said, I tested it with an audience, and then made a full product out of it. But then, and I've iterated on it a lot since, as I got to discover, like, who really cares about this more, right? Because I can assume, and it's like, when it meets the world, that's where you get this idea that I think is useful, but it's, like, product market fit. Like, how well do you understand the needs of others, and is this actually living up to meeting a need, right? So, like, I
right.
think,
Yeah. So is that where we're going to go after our break? Is like, okay, so you sign on to this idea to make a product. You build yourself a calendar, a schedule, a Gantt chart. You come up with ways to make it manageable by allocating this many hours a day over this many weeks, and you will have a finished thing. Now what?
hmm. Also, now what? And what happened?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what do you think now that you did that thing?
Right. Right. Yeah, there's an intuition that starts this stuff, and it's I mean, I think that's one of the things that's so attractive about art, is that we can explore heuristically and intuit things and try things out and see what feels right. And there's a lot of it that is that. And then but there's a lot more experience to be had, right? I'll put it that way, right? There's other stuff happening that you can look at if you want to, and that's what we'll do maybe after a quick break. What do you say?
I love it because there's so much of this that's optional and your point of view, and let's explore ways, because in a way, like we started talking about, there's the product, and then there's more, and that's not to burden you right away. You don't have to care about that, and let's talk about more about why and how that
There we go.
might work.
Great. Okay. So we'll come back in about a minute and a half to talk about that. But first, we have to thank some people who make this show possible. Those folks are the people who support us on Patreon. Yes, patreon.com/leanintoart is the website. What is it? It's a way for you to give us a monthly upvote. If you believe in what we're doing and you want to help it make it more sustainable, you can start out by contributing as little as $1 a month. And you can also cancel at any time. You don't have to stay on a regular basis. You could do a one-time donation and just cancel after you've availed yourself of all that extra behind-the-scenes stuff. But there are 5 people that I want to thank this week who have been supporting us on an ongoing basis. First up, Stephen Stonebush. Thank you, Stephen, for believing in us and what we do. And Carrie Goebel-Billick, who you can find everywhere online as Mushin Girl. Thank you, Carrie. It means a lot to us. And Sophie Lawson. You can find Sophie on Twitter at Sophie Lawson Art. Thank you, Sophie. And Merjam. Thank you, Merjam, for supporting us for a long time now. We really appreciate it. You can find Merjam on Twitter at MYRJAMVDV. These will all be linked in the show notes, by the way, so you can follow these people, because if they get something out of the show and you get something out of the show, they're probably people you'd want to talk to. And finally, Dave Sri Say. Thank you, Dave Sri. Longtime friend of the show, been on the show a bunch of times, creator of the Emergent Task Planner, which we talk about a lot. You can find Dave Sri on Twitter at Dave Say. And you can join them all at patreon.com/leanintoart, where you will find all the shows we make, as well as the extra leans, the shows we record only for people who support us on Patreon. Those posts become an open mic thread where you can talk about whatever you want in a safe space with fellow leaners. Thanks again to everybody who supports us at patreon.com/leanintoart. It means a lot.
It really does. That's what a wonderful thing to hear.
All right. Second part.
Here we are.
Here we are. Thanks to the Thundercats. So, what happens? What happened and what happens next? Let's talk about that.
Okay. So I think it's easy. Let's say that are you a planner? Do you like to try to you can be a planner and still use your gut or whatever, but you can you can dig an analytical well and get stuck in there, right? And that's not what I'm trying to encourage. What I'm trying to encourage is that there's a whole sort of I think there's a complex dynamic as far as you make a thing that you believe in. That's enough. That is its own plenty of work to do. And I think a lot of us, that's a natural place to start. And I think that it's also part of yet a bigger picture. So how many of these do you want to keep connecting to and exploring and mapping out and including? Just like when you include constraints when you make a project.
Mm-hmm.
You can find your own framing and emphasize or de-emphasize different parts of this. And that's, I think, wonderful, honestly. Like I that's why I get excited about talking about this topic, is because I feel like I've bumped into a lot of walls and challenges and pitfalls and stuff like that. And I think, having reflected on it and looking back, asking the whole, like, well, what happened? And then now what? Is I don't know, maybe there's some useful tools in there. And then it's just finding which tools resonate with you and then include them, or if they don't. Because and that's what's so exciting. It's like you can hear it's I don't know what, like why did it take me so long? But I got really excited when I realized Jerzy turns every creative challenge into a product. And it's because I wasn't that open to trying it myself, to be honest. I was like, no, I'm going to practice. I'm going to feel good generating a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I don't know, that's enough. But then is it? Because look at that. I admire this. I want to do that too. So.
Yeah. And I should, what am I trying to say? I want to be careful to say that the products that I develop are like you were talking about with Guitar Fighter. They're like sort of like a version one, like it's a deliverable thing. Like so, the Baron von Bear mini comic that I made 2 years ago for Inktober, I had a shippable thing, but it wasn't like I wouldn't consider it finished because I've since revised a lot of ideas that I explored in that mini comic. So I've always thought of it as use the constraints to force me to finish a thing. Otherwise, I will get stuck in that analytical well and I'll second guess myself and I will try to prove all of my guesses before I put pen to paper, you know? I'll try to test my hypotheses before I've tested them, you know?
Mm.
Um,
And
and
it hurts
so,
like because it's so true, and I feel this pain like having done this. Oh,
so then like, and you know, years ago, I remember thinking like, well, you can't math your way into finishing a thing. Like, and I remember thinking like, well, if I could just, I know having like looked at how long it takes me to finish a page, if I just like say like if a page is 8 hours, I can just chunk it out to like 1 hour a day per week. I'll get almost a page done per week on a personal project. Like, well, yes, but then there's this other missing ingredient, which is called motivation, stick to itiveness, showing up. Right? I can have that hour scheduled but if I don't do anything about it, it's not going to get done anyway. So like that, the creative challenge thing is like the perfect storm of accountability, motivation. I want to play along with all these people. I don't feel because like this is just self knowledge, right? This has nothing to do with. I'm not putting this on any other artist, but I know that if I feel like I'm being beholden to something, I get really resentful. I'm like, well, I'm not going to do it then. Watch me say no, you know. But if it's like, oh, everybody else is having fun, I want to play too, then I'm engaged, you know, and I feel like I want to show up to do it. So then it was like that combination of like, okay, well, I've got the math. I could do an 8-page mini comic and I can break all the panels into like this many hours and put it in a spreadsheet and then time it for this day when everybody's doing it too. So then I feel like I'm playing along with the gang sort of thing. And now I've got a version of the product that is shippable. But you know, I feel like these days when I do that, I'm relaxed enough to know that, well, it's not done. Like, and so last year I did the Baron von Bear pitch for during the October challenge month. And the really nice thing about that was feeling like I could just let it go when it was done. Like, okay, I've got a draft of this thing, a suggestion of a graphic novel, but I don't feel like I have to be wedded to anything that's in this. Because like once now that that's out in the world and editors are looking at it, I feel at peace with them coming back saying, yeah, well, could you change this, this, and this? And we feel it'd be more marketable if it had this, this, and this. Okay, I'm ready to have that conversation. I'm not going to feel assaulted by that suggestion necessarily. I mean, it depends on what it is, I guess, right? Like, if like, well, we'd like to challenge the core thesis of your work and suggest you do something utterly different. I don't know about that, but you know, it's like, well, could the Baron's suit be gray? Sure, why not? Anyway, I don't know if that was at all what you were.
it's very much there. It's like there's so many awesome elements of what you shared there because there's an unknowable threshold of that I love creative disciplines that try to take in big systemic perspective, yet also really putting stuff into the world is the only way where we get to really learn, right? So that's why like prototyping, being open to iterating on projects, and how that's awesome how you called that initial Baron von Bear comic like uh, version one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's so much version one, version two, and it's like evolution that can happen if you're willing to like, well, learn whatever you got to learn to get navigate your own quirks for getting a thing into the world. There's great recipes and patterns that work for lots of folks. Maybe they work for you, maybe they don't, but like, you know, some basics of having clarity of your capacity for different things and committing for really committing to make, getting something done, working whatever you have to do to get it done. We've seen tons and tons of memes and jokes and comics about like creating is hard, let's procrastinate, whatever. Yes, I know, fine. But like somewhere you navigate that and you get a thing into the world, and then there's the then what, because it meets its audience, it meets other constraints, and distribution platform and whatever's. But that's the version 1, and you can learn from it, and that's pretty darn powerful, because looking back, like you described all sorts of like your own personal quirks and stuff, like finding your like how you're framing problems and then adding to how you can frame problems. That's a pretty darn useful tool, and that's where I that's uh, having Jake's product or project, or you need a product, not a project, as a framing for that. It, to me, that's like a thread you can pull on. It's get the thing done, and then what? And the then what could be, and you have your some more work to do on yourself, because maybe there's improvements in your skills, or maybe you've not now have a I think this comes from some of my background and working in like lab style teams adjacent to corporate strategy and all that kind of stuff. But like, and I can get this maybe getting obtuse and weird, but think of this as a sample of other vocab, whatever. Um, so you think about yourself as a business entity. You are an individual, you're a creator, maybe a part of a small team, what have you, and you're putting something into the world because you have the capabilities to put the thing into the world. And you might have expanded or tested your capabilities. That's interesting. It's worth observing. So maybe that's a really good fit of, well, magical bears and their friends tackling interesting magical adventures with danger and cute animals. That's cool. Or Hello Kitty meets what?
Doctor Strange. It was
Doctor
Hello Kitty
Strange.
meets, yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. So you tested that. You test that idea. And so like the idea that like, well, memorizing the guitar fretboard could be a game, and it can both be fun to play the game as its raw mechanics and reflexes and the different subtle positive reinforcement feedback mechanisms that are baked into there. And also it can help you memorize the guitar fretboard. I didn't do a scientific study, but I've had feedback where people have said this. So I have qualitative evidence, in my opinion, that it's fulfilling that. Okay. Gosh, lots of threads to pull on there. So,
well, you mentioned the word framing. So how would you talk about choosing a framing? I wonder if you could dig a little bit deeper into that, because like I'm thinking of this as I need to be doing constant product development churn, because while I'm working on whatever jobs I have in front of me, I have to be developing new things to potentially sell to partners like publishers and so on. So there's a framework in there of part of this is not just creative expression. Part of this is like creating marketing materials for myself and or potential product development for engaging with trade with publishers, right? The Baron von Bear mini comic that I made 2 years ago was the precursor to developing the pitch, which is now out being looked at by editors, right? And that's like an independent business person's approach to this development, right? Because that pitch isn't for the public.
Right, that's a good point. So like you made a product that's helping make your business have a sustainable cash flow by landing a deal, right? And so the outcome of that product, in a way, it's a different kind of product for a different kind of framing. That is interesting. So and then I guess to continue that and also add a couple of things from the other train of thought is that you're building, and this is a bit of the how, like, looking at it as a business. So you invested in your capabilities, right? And your capabilities are of strategic value to you. You will repeat, like, are you really practiced in drawing in the genres and topics and styles that you want to draw within, right?
Oh yeah,
That's a capability. That's a sellable thing. Like,
yeah.
is maybe not appealing that can sound like, but like, this is where when you put on others' perspectives, you get to maybe find conflict, maybe harmony with your own creator approach. But you have capabilities, and also, like, in a way, components. So think about like how there's house styles at different animation places and what have you, and they've got processes. So your process is a component, your style is a component, and all the stuff that you've practiced. So like you can take your capabilities and components and make more products. That is a thing that you've invested in as a business to be able to deliver. And so you can think about that strategically and say down the road, and this is where this, I love all my friends who work in strategy. And I find um, there's potentially conflict between our different approaches. So I've experienced.
Okay.
So, because you got long-term creative cycles, right? Where it's like you can know some of what's going to happen a year or two from now, or 5 or 10, whatever. But are you going to know that much? How much of that should really affect what you're doing right now? Maybe some,
Right.
a little bit, because where do you
Mhm.
want to go and all that stuff, right? So strategy, what have you. So invest in the capabilities and components and things that you want to have to make more products. That's the framing, right? So like another way to look at it is like, what do you want to do more of? What do you want to do less of?
Mm.
Anyway, so what do you think? So that business framing, what do you,
No,
how does that
that makes
resonate?
sense. Yeah, yeah. Because another thing that I find that I am very guilty of is, and I shake it off usually pretty quickly, but like I'll start with, well, this is what the world wants. The world didn't ask for what I'm making, so I'm gonna like do something more of what the world seems to want right now,
Sure.
right?
Right. Chasing a market.
Yeah, and just that simple sentence that you uttered, which was, what do I want to be doing less of? What do I want to be doing more of? Right. Something like that too.
Oh,
I mean, and this is why like a lot of artists will tell you put the stuff in your portfolio that you love doing. Don't put the stuff that you think will get you more gigs, because otherwise you're going to find yourself doing stuff that isn't as interesting to you. So
that's a really pragmatic way to deal with that.
yeah,
And so you can just you can adopt that as your approach to say, this will accrete and build up. And eventually, like, I stand out in this area. So this should
yeah, and
work well for me as a strategy.
a good example that Ann and I talk about when we're doing workshops together is one of the reasons we got the Rockets book from First Second was because in 2007, a long time ago, we made a mini comic about the Apollo 12 mission, because we just happened to love the Apollo 12 mission. And so we did an 8-page story about it, took it to conventions, traded it around, and editor of the Science Comics series remembered that book and said like, hey, I know 2 people who are really into rockets. Let's see what they could do with a book about rockets, So it's something that it's a personal project. We created a product to put out into the world to see what people say about it, and there was a payoff way down the road in the sense that we left a trail of competency that where somebody who we could engage with trade with gave us that opportunity to engage with in trade, right? So
That's great. So like in a way, that's building a brand as well. So the
mhm.
awareness and the story of your work is one way to look at what a brand is.
Yeah.
The recognition, the recall, that's when a brand is performing its job.
Mm.
And that's and it can be subtle because it's just the trust in the qualities and capabilities that you have to provide.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a more nuanced way of talking about like this idea of like leaving a trail of competence, right?
Mhm.
Because like
They're useful.
I
Isn't that interesting? Different framings, right?
yeah,
They're both kind of pointing towards some general space, and whichever framing works, that's pick and use
yeah.
for.
Well, I'm grateful that we're teasing at this a little bit, because like one of the things that a lot of cartoonists say is like, if you just make good work and put it out in the world, it will get attention. I'm like, well, I think there is some truth to this idea. I get nervous when something's reduced to that simple a phrasing, right? Because
Mhm.
well, what does that mean? Does that mean it's like just like a magic trick? Like you just like put stuff in the world and like good things happen, build it, and they will come. I'm not so sure, but like when you look at it, a little bit more deeply than that, and it's like, well, okay, well, you're putting things in the world and watching how they react in the world, and you're continuing to refine and build and engage. It's like it was years of going to conventions, Anne and me, with that Rocket book before it led to that opportunity, right? But we took it every year to every convention since 2007.
Wow. That's what a powerful example. And it's the there's a and so looking back, this is the now we're practicing the whole looking back and like, well,
Mm-hmm.
what happened, and also where do you want to go, and the that had an effect, and that did work, but then it's not that precise, right? So it's not like there's only one, like, is as you're going along, that's probably not the only product and the only thing you're doing, right? So you probably have multiple experiments and explorations going on and whatnot,
Absolutely.
but consistently investing in that one, I mean, that is an investment. That's another idea of like, this is a thing you believe in enough where you continue to do it. And I think I get nervous too with all your eggs in one basket. Do only one thing,
Yeah.
and um, only, let's see, like at the exclusion of all else, and then just put good things in the world, and people will come. How many people can I pay the
Uh-huh.
rent with that
Yeah.
and all that?
Yeah.
And that's where I know humbly that it's not all up to me, right? Where is the world right now, and how do I relate to it, and what can I do, and what have you.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Part of this
Yeah.
is
That's
discovery.
uh and this is why when it comes to this product development thing, I always come back to this mini comics idea, because it is such an affordable way to to create test materials, to get reactions from the world, to see where that these are all things I'm interested in. These are all things that I enjoy doing. Let me put them all in the world and see which ones start to get the reaction, so I can start investing more in that direction. And even then, like, it depends on how you're putting it into the world. Like, so for instance, my Boulder and Fleet mini comics are among my most popular mini comics at shows. I get a lot of reaction from them. Didn't have a lot of success selling the book, like getting a publishing deal for it, right? So, okay, well, now that's a whole different audience that I got to think about. Okay, well, I'm getting a lot of signal from this audience. Here's the audience that provides a whole different kind of trade. What can I learn from what I'm hearing from them about this thing?
Super powerful there. Recognizing that a signal has context, right?
Mm-hmm.
And tease it apart, like explore, like what are you seeing? Make your own observations in there. And that's, I think, really useful to feedback into your framing. Use it as feedback, and ask, what can you learn from this? And just the idea though, that recognizing those are different audiences. Like, we've all faced rejection or different things that have, worked well at one, and then suddenly didn't work well or whatever. And it just, you're puzzling. You're having, you're getting some signal, but it's not really obvious necessarily what's within there. But if you take time, you can find things to observe inside there. And that's that can feed back into your product. And that's the I guess that's the useful thing. That as long as, with the caution of, avoid getting trapped in analysis, but just using a little bit to sort of, um, you know, build up for your next attempt, and what are you going to try or do, and this, as far as what are you going to invest in next, and how are you feeling a little more confident this time.
Mm.
So there's other things too, as far as, all these different areas of like people that you work with, if they're from legal or finance, or their primary thing is a particular area of business, of in sales, or acquisition of books, or making business deal, whatever. They all have interesting creative ways to look at the world. That's what I've learned, and I try to borrow from them.
That's good. I feel like this is a good exploration of the topic for now, right? This is something we're to come back to again and again, and this is like us checking in on it in early 2020? What do you think? Or is
I
there
think
any?
so.
Okay.
I think it's a long. I think it's a longer conversation, and the only thing that could happen now is we'll step in more jargon. So I just
And I
cleaned
didn't.
off my shoes.
I
So
I was just say I didn't wear my galoshes today, so I don't want to step in any more jargon.
mhm.
All right. So do you want to take another break and then come back with the switching from like goal oriented product development and like talk about practicing again for the 2-minute practice this week?
I love it. Let's do that.
Okay, we're going to come back in about minute and a half, 2 minutes, and talk about this week's 2-minute practice. Before we do that, we got to thank some more people who make this show possible, and those people happen to be us. We make the show possible, and the thing that we make lots of stuff, and then we think really hard about the stuff we make, and then we bring those thoughts to this thing called Lean Into Art. And the thing that I make that I hope you will check out this week is another podcast I do called the 4 Million Years Later podcast, and we just finished talking about season one. Season one of what? The Transformers cartoon from 1984. Me and an old friend of mine watch an episode of the show a week, and then we convene to talk about what we saw. We talk about it from the perspective of like how we engaged with it as young people, because we're Gen Xers. We grew up with the show, and we talk about how we feel about it now. Well, how is our perspective change about these characters? Rob and I were just texting each other last night about my relationship with the character Starscream, and how when I was a child, I looked at him and said, like, oh, that's what confidence looks like, because he stands up to all these other people and asserts his personality in this room full of people who all worship Megatron. Now as an adult, I look at him, I'm like, nope, he was an incomplete picture of what self-confidence is. He's self-aggrandizement. He is a POS after all, and I never realized it as a child. So you can find it at 4millionyearslater.com, and you can also find it in your favorite podcatcher. And like I said, you can watch along and listen to the entire first season of the show. Rob, you make all sorts of products and videos at Skillshare.
Totally. And we need to put in our segment here a little high five for when I get to react to your product. Because 4 million years later is a really delightful podcast. I highly recommend adding it to your feeds, because it's more of Jersey's analysis, but applied to that world of story. It just happens to be this story that really connects with Jerzy from his childhood and whatnot. But like hearing that kind of story analysis with Jerzy and Hoover is it's fantastic. It's fun, laughing, joyful, and deeply analytical.
It is very, very boisterous. I will say that. Like Anne, who's working from home right now, said to me last week after recording an episode, it's like you were shouting so loud it almost sounded like you were yelling at Hoover. So yeah, it's a high energy show. But yes, but let's talk about your Skillshare page and your store section on your website.
Sounds awesome. So if you go to robstenzinger.com, or specifically robstenzinger.com/store.html, you'll find the things that I sell. And one of the things I just want to emphasize today is this set of workshops that I have, sort of my 4 recent workshops that relate to a variety of creative endeavors, where you can get deeper into collaboration and visualizing that collaboration from the perspective of your users using this drawing user journey maps workshop. You can have a great time exploring character design for fun with yourself or with your family, doing the workshop Sketching Happiest Kitty. Or if you're thinking about, hey, this product stuff sounds really interesting, or project, and I've got a whole workshop about basically creating your own custom creative challenge. And that digs into like really tuning it for what fits for you. What is your capacity, and what kind of fun is fun for you, and let's tune that creative challenge to work for you. Whole workshop for that. And then there's goal setting using design plus storytelling, and that's the whole thing where of like, well, what are some outcomes you're trying to bring about in the next 5 years, and the big topics and buckets and whatnot. Then how do you take specific steps to like bring that about, and then how do you make that an easy story to tell? And this workshop takes you through like 7 exercises and has a nice pre-made workbook for you to work through these activities. And me and Kate Shield Stenzinger take you through each of those activities with lots of context and background. And each of these is roughly half an hour. Like the longest one is like 47 minutes. So a lot of useful things that you can watch and rewatch and explore some fun, creative endeavors.
And that's at robstenzinger.com/store.html, linked in
There you
the
go.
show notes. And then the last thing we hope you'll check out today is the Lean Into Art Discord. Yes, we have a forum now, and there are 6 channels in there, 6 sort of like conversation areas. 3 are public, where you can request future topics of shows. You can comment on past episodes. You can even post some of your challenges and quests if you are engaged in or participating in the 2-minute practice. That's where you can post your results. And then there's 3 channels that are only for people who support us on Patreon, including a social channel where you just post about, hey, here's the zucchini I made last night. Doesn't it look pretty? And we'll say, yes, it does. Links in the show notes, the invite link. So you can join us there at the Lean Into Art Discord. Okay. Talk about the 2-minute practice. Hi there, Rob.
Hey, Jerzy. 2-minute practice time, huh?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And what was our practice?
You picked one that I've been following this pattern of like whoever picks it, I just kind of go with it overall. Like there's been a little bit of adjustments and there's always interpretation, but it's been such a fun thing where there's like a built-in prompt. I know that our approach is you don't have to do what our prompt is. We're just here to celebrate 2-minute practices. But here I went and drew circles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How'd it go?
Like how did I feel good about the process, but aspects were more intense than I expected because I'm just drawing circles, right? But you can draw circles at a leisurely pace, or you can really draw a lot of circles. and I honestly like both. I feel pretty great after either way, but like clearly if I'm just trying to put as many circles on a page as I can, it's a lot more intense than I expected. I don't know why. It's kind of obvious, but like I guess that's part of the practice. I'm realizing that like a lot of things per second that's going to get my heart rate up.
Did it?
Like, well, a little bit, yeah.
Wow.
Like I think I.
So what size paper were you working with?
How many? Yeah. What's that?
What size paper were you working with?
I used standard US 8.5 by 11.
Okay. Letter sheet of paper. Wow. And like, so interesting. I just want to get more clarification on this. You felt like it wasn't enough to just draw in like a corner of the sheet. You had to fill the sheet when you were doing the practice.
Well, I started to be less intense about it. And because I noticed like, wow, this is intense. And so I think I gravitated toward the like making circles in a pattern of and sort of going different sizes. And that was one of my more relaxing ones. Mm-hmm. But then I noticed it was so relaxing. And then I added a bunch more circles.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. What I'm not sure. I can think more about takeaways, but I'm really curious about your.
Well, I'd rather stay on your takeaways because I whiffed this one, and it's weird, right? Because it was specifically such a simple one to do. Oh my gosh! So then you did like nested circles inside of circles.
Well, that's the thing. I look for patterns, and so I did circles like. I don't know. There's a lot of circles.
Like a crowd of little tiny circles.
It almost is like different sizes.
Giant circles surrounded by little tiny bubbles of circles.
Yeah, this is one of the more mellow ones because it varied. Because I used a softer pen, and it's almost like the marker tip was big enough where it just made a circle. Mm-hmm. Just boop. I'm like, hey, that's a circle.
Gotcha. Yep. And filling them in, yeah. So like, when in my head, my engagement with this thing was going to be like the way you do telephone doodles, right? Like the old stereotype of like you're talking on the phone and you're just like sort of absent-mindedly sketching on the back of an envelope or something like that. And my takeaway, having totally whiffed it, is I need to be more thoughtful about incorporating some kind of meditative practice into my day and be more intentional and committed to that idea, because I just the week just got away from me, and I felt like there was like kind of an anxious energy around all my work that
Mm.
I didn't. I feel like if I had attended to it, I would have had something in there to like make me step back, you know. Like we did art meditation for one of the 2-minute practices a while back, and I got a lot of value out of just taking that 2 minutes to just let the pencil do what it wants. And that's what I was hoping this would be for me, and I did not attend to it. So, and it's weird. It's
Would
like
you? How big of paper would you have used?
I would have done just a sticky note. I mean, it was sitting
Would
right
have been
here
better.
next.
That's a good idea.
It was right here next to my keyboard. Right, it was ready for me. My pen. It was all set up, and I just didn't attend to it. So, um, but
That has
I
a big
mean,
effect too. The space you choose to fill can make it seem more daunting or less, or
mm,
like, a workout adventure. Watch, like you can put a lot of circles on an 8.5 and 11 sheet of paper, as you could on a sticky note. But like what are those, like 2.5 or 3 inches by 3 inches, something like that?
uh, yeah,
And
yeah, three
that's
inches
gonna
by three
make it
inches.
more calm, I think.
I would think so. Yeah. I
Mm.
Although, I like the idea of also working larger. So I just finished teaching a class recently for fifth graders, and I noticed there was this one student in my class who draws really tiny. She was drawing so tiny. It was all very detailed and it was very precise, but it was super small. And I was like, okay, well, here, guess what? And I put this like giant piece of poster board in front of her. I'm like, you're going to draw the world in which your character lives. I just want to see what their world looks like. And she's like, okay, well, I'm just going to use this corner. I'm like, nope, you're using the whole sheet. And she's like, but that'll take forever. I'm like, learn how to draw bigger. It's like you can draw big, you can draw small, but you should be able to do both. And then she did, and she drew like this like giant wilderness landscape, and it wasn't like as densely detailed as like her little drawings were. And she's like, well, I still like drawing small. I'm like, okay, but still, there's something that I don't know. Like I would think that it would be fun to also do like a poster board and use my whole arm and draw some circles that way too. That might be
I bet it would. Gosh,
yeah.
that was fun. I did set like a few practices ago. That's what I did. I used what was it? Like 20 by, I forget what size, 16 by 20 paper, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And oh, yeah, big arm motions. It was energetic. It was like a little mini workout, but like it felt great. It felt like I don't know. Like I did like I let something out of me. That's what it felt like.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. Um, it's interesting to me that last week's challenge, which I took on a little bit hard, it was a bit more of a challenge because I was like doodling on postcards and mailing them to friends. So there was like a little bit more built-in effort at the outset to like pick my postcards, stamp them, address them, and then do the 2 minutes of like drawing on each one of them. Like that I was able to pull off, but this week a relatively simpler challenge somehow I didn't manage to get to. So I think, like I said, I think my takeaway is that like I need to commit to this, not just for its own sake, but for the sake of introducing some kind of well, to quote Kate Stenzinger, she said it years ago, and it sticks in my brain because it was such a meaningful and useful phrasing, which would make a purposeful pause. I need to like make space for that. 'Cause I'm not doing it.
I'm actually with you too, because it's a little chaotic how I integrate this practice.
Mm.
And it's sometimes it's a warm up, sometimes it's a cool down, sometimes it's a calm warm up, and then sometimes it's an intense cool down. So it's all this mismatch happening. But I like it overall. It feels like a positive thing I chose to do in my day when I've been able to succeed in adding it to my day, because I've been very wildly inconsistent this entire time. Do I don't think I've succeeded in doing 7 in a row, 7 different days, but
Mm.
I've made it, typically been able to do something, and then except the last one, did not didn't succeed there. But that's an interesting thing in and of itself. That is data. That's
Yep.
why did that happen? What do I want to do about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's this isn't a pass or fail class, right? This is a observe and watch and test and do class. So, all right.
That's awesome.
So, do we have an idea what we want to do for this week's practice?
I don't know. Maybe I had a not fully baked idea. If you're ready to
Okay.
help me finish this recipe,
Okay.
want to give it a try?
Sure.
All right. So, let's see. How about like we could? I don't know. This is asking for trouble because it's throwing in randomality, right? But you take a dice, a little six-sided die, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, so what if you wrote? All right, where do you? Because mine gets complicated. Do you think using a dice is a good idea?
I think anytime you can introduce randomality to these kinds of practices, it's almost always a good idea. I do this a lot in my classrooms. I mean, years ago, Ann and I did the 12-12 mini comics, which was all based on randomality. Grab a random New York Times headline, grab 3 random objects out of a bag, make a story out of it. Didn't do it in 2 minutes, but I mean, I like the idea of like, there's this idea that I think I find it has a lot of utility in my classroom is just start moving the pencil. Just start moving the pencil and stuff will happen. And the randomality prevents you from getting too worried about whether or not you're being clever, right? Work with what you got. What'd you roll? You rolled a 5. What are you doing with it?
Cool. So then I thought, I'll share the rest of the idea.
Okay.
So what if you roll a 6-sided dice 3 times? So first you're dealing with your primary shape you're dealing with, which is dot, line, triangle, square, circle, or blob. That's 6. And then you can do the mood. So it's just shape and then the mood. And then there's 3 moods. 1 to 2 is happy. 3 to 4 is grumpy. 5 to 6 is confused or silly, right? And then the third one could just be how many you're drawing.
Okay. So in other words, I roll a 4, and a 4 would be a square. Okay, there's my shape. Yes. And then I roll again and I get a 3. Well, okay, it's a happy square. And then the third roll would be I got 2. So I'm going to do 2 happy squares.
Yes.
Okay. That makes sense.
All right.
I say go for it. I mean, in as with all of the 2-minute practices, this is not a prescription. Spin it however you want. Take on whatever practice you want. But the only thing we ask is if you've got something that you want to show, like to present to the other leaners for feedback or for high fives, go to the Lean Into Art Discord and post them in the Challenges Quest channel, and we'll be glad to react to and interact with your experience doing the 2-minute practice.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you, Jerzy.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, so I think we did a podcast again. What do you think?
I think we did. And I think we actually walked by a whole tunnel of other podcasts. We were like, let's just stay on our current path. We finished 1 podcast today. So we're there.
One per customer. So thank you for all the thoughts on this one, Rob. I think this is a fun exploration that I know we're to come back to again and again. And we record the show every week usually at noon Eastern time, 11 a.m. Central. And then we stream it live on twitch.tv/leanintoart and then collect it as a podcast at leanintoart.com and patreon.com/leanintoart. We'll be back next time with another episode. Until then, I have been Jerzy Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jerzy Drozd on Instagram.
Oh, and I've been Rob Stenzinger, also of leanintoart.com. And I'm Rob Stenzinger, places like Instagram.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.